My name is Naomi Hayes. I'm a pharmaceutical researcher, 28 years old, and up until that night, my biggest concerns were clinical trial protocols and whether I'd remembered to water the plants in my apartment. I wasn't the kind of woman who got involved in dangerous situations. I lived a quiet, careful life, built on science and reason. But reason doesn't matter when you're watching a man about to die. It started with a business dinner. My company, Midwest Bioresearch, had been courting a potential investor for months, and our vice president finally secured a meeting at Giordano's, one of those upscale Italian restaurants in the Gold Coast where a single entree costs more than my weekly grocery budget. I'd spent an hour getting ready, smoothing my natural curls into a professional bun, choosing a burgundy sheath dress that said, "Competent Scientist," without being too formal. The restaurant was everything I'd expected. Low lighting, crystal chandeliers, the kind of place where conversations happened in hushed tones, and everyone seemed to know exactly which fork to use. Our table was near the back, positioned perfectly for business discussions. But I noticed him immediately. The man at the table beside ours sat alone, which seemed strange in a restaurant designed for intimate conversations and power meetings. He was maybe 35, with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes the color of storm clouds before lightning strikes. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than my car, and there was something about the way he held himself, a quiet authority that made the waitstaff approach his table with deference bordering on fear. Every time someone passed his table, they nodded respectfully. The maitre d' checked on him personally 3 times in 15 minutes, and when he lifted his water glass, I noticed the slightest tremor in his hand, quickly controlled, that suggested he was aware of something the rest of us weren't. My colleague, Jennifer, was in the middle of explaining our latest research on enzyme inhibitors when I saw it. A waiter, young, maybe 23, with nervous eyes, approached the man's table with a glass of wine. Deep red, probably a Barolo based on the restaurant's wine list. Nothing unusual, except I'd been watching the man long enough to notice he hadn't ordered anything yet beyond water. The waiter set the glass down with hands that shook almost imperceptibly. He murmured something I couldn't hear. And then he walked away. Not back toward the bar where he'd presumably come from, but directly toward the exit. Moving fast. Too fast. Call it instinct. Call it years of working with chemical compounds and knowing when something's off. Call it whatever you want. But I knew with absolute certainty that something was wrong with that wine. The man, the one with storm gray eyes, reached for the glass. He lifted it toward his lips, and I moved. I don't remember standing up. Don't remember crossing the 3 feet between our tables. I just remember my hand closing around his wrist, stopping the glass inches from his mouth, and the words tumbling from my lips before my brain caught up with my body. "Don't drink that." He froze. Those storm gray eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that should have made me step back, should have made me apologize and retreat to my table. But I was committed now, and the fear in my chest was screaming that I was right. "I'm a pharmaceutical researcher," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "I've worked with toxins. That wine, there's something wrong with it. The way it's separating slightly at the rim, the viscosity. I think there's something dissolved in it that shouldn't be there." The restaurant had gone silent. Jennifer's mouth hung open. Our potential investor looked like he'd wandered into the wrong meeting, and the man whose wrist I still gripped stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. Then he smiled. It was the kind of smile that made my pulse race for entirely different reasons than fear. "What's your name?" His voice was deep, with the faintest trace of an Italian accent that turned the words into something almost musical. "Naomi Hayes." "Well, Naomi Hayes." He carefully set the wine glass back on the table, his wrist still in my grip. "You've just done something very brave or very foolish. Possibly both." He turned his head slightly, and I noticed for the first time the other men in the restaurant. They weren't dining. They were positioned, 3 of them at separate tables, all watching our interaction with hawk-like attention, all now standing and moving toward us with predatory purpose. "Marco," the man said calmly, not taking his eyes off me, "get that wine tested. And find the waiter who brought it." One of the men, tall and built like a linebacker in an expensive suit, nodded and carefully retrieved the glass using a cloth napkin. He disappeared toward the kitchen with speed that suggested this wasn't his first time handling potential evidence. "You should sit," the man continued, his tone making it clear it wasn't a suggestion. "We have things to discuss, you and I." My practical brain finally kicked in, screaming that I should run, get back to my table, pretend this never happened. But my body seemed to have other ideas. I sank into the chair across from him, my legs suddenly uncertain they could hold my weight. "I'm Dante Rossi," he said, watching my face carefully for recognition. "I'm afraid I don't know that name. Should I?" Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe. Perhaps respect. His world and mine, so different they barely overlapped. Most people in this city know it. Most people would have let me drink that wine and walked away, preferring not to get involved. I couldn't do that. The scientist in me couldn't let someone ingest a potentially lethal compound without warning them. The scientist in you. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with an intensity that felt like being dissected under a microscope. "Tell me, Naomi Hayes, what makes a pharmaceutical researcher dining at Giordano's notice something wrong with a glass of wine from across a table?" I explained the visual cues, the separation I'd noticed, the way certain toxins create subtle changes in liquid viscosity that most people wouldn't catch, but that I'd trained myself to recognize through years of lab work. I talked about molecular structures and dissolution rates, falling into the comfortable language of science because it was safer than acknowledging the danger I'd just walked into. He listened without interrupting, his focus absolute. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You have a good eye," he finally said, "and instincts that just saved my life. The question now is what to do about that." "I don't understand." "In my world, Naomi, debts are not taken lightly. You saved my life tonight. That creates an obligation." "I don't want anything," I said quickly. "I just didn't want to see someone die." Nevertheless, his hand moved across the table, palm up, an invitation and a command. "Give me your phone." "Why?" "Because I want your number, and because refusing me would be unwise, given that the people who tried to poison me tonight now know you intervened." The words hit like ice water. I'd been so focused on the immediate crisis that I hadn't considered the consequences. Whoever had tried to kill Dante Rossi might view my interference as a problem requiring elimination. My hands shook as I pulled my phone from my purse and handed it over. He entered his number with quick efficiency, then called himself so he had mine. When he handed the phone back, his fingers brushed mine, a connection that sent electricity racing up my arm. "Go back to your dinner, Naomi. Pretend this never happened, but keep your phone close. I'll be in touch." "How did you know I wasn't the one who poisoned the wine?" "Because," he said softly, "if you wanted me dead, you would have let me drink it. And because I've made a career of reading people, and you, Bella, are not a killer. You're something far more dangerous." "What's that?" "Innocent." The word hung between us like a prophecy. Marco returned then, leaning down to whisper in Dante's ear. I caught fragments. Confirmed. Aconitine. Lethal dose. Waiter's gone. Working on tracking. Dante's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. A coiling tension that suggested violence barely restrained. "Thank you for dinner," he said to me, his voice perfectly pleasant despite what he'd just learned. "I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Everything you order tonight is on me, naturally." He stood, and the movement brought all three of his men to attention. They moved as one unit, surrounding him in a protective formation that was simultaneously subtle and undeniable. As they walked toward the exit, every person in the restaurant tracked their movement, not with curiosity, with fear. "What the hell was that?" Jennifer hissed once they were gone. "I have no idea," I lied, but I did have an idea, and it terrified me. I spent the next 3 days trying to convince myself I'd imagined the danger, that Dante Rossi was just a wealthy businessman with paranoid security, that the poison was a mistake, maybe a terrible prank gone wrong, that I could go back to my normal life of lab work and scientific journals and evening runs along the lake. Reality came calling at 2:30 in the morning on Saturday. My phone rang, the sound jarring me from uneasy sleep. The number was unknown, but I answered anyway, some instinct telling me I needed to. "Naomi." Dante's voice rough and urgent. "I need you to listen very carefully. There are men coming to your apartment. You have maybe 5 minutes. Pack a bag. Essentials only. My people will be there in 3 minutes to get you." "What?" "I'm not going anywhere. I don't understand. The men who tried to poison me know where you live. They've decided you're a loose end. There's no time to argue. Pack. Now. The line went dead. For exactly 10 seconds, I sat frozen in my bed, my rational mind insisting this was insane, that I should call the police, that I shouldn't trust a man I barely knew. Then I heard it, the faint sound of the building's exterior door opening. Footsteps in the stairwell. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. I had maybe 90 seconds. I moved on pure adrenaline. Grabbed my emergency bag from the closet, the one I'd prepared after reading too many disaster preparedness articles, shoved in my laptop, my research notebooks, my passport, changed out of my sleep shirt into jeans and a sweater, was shoving my feet into sneakers when I heard voices outside my door. Low. Male. Speaking in Italian. My apartment had a fire escape. I'd always thought of it as a charming architectural feature. Now, it was a lifeline. I was climbing through the window when I heard my front door crash open. Didn't look back. Just climbed down as fast as I could, my bag banging against my hip, my heart thundering so loud I was sure they could hear it from 3 floors up. I dropped the last 6 feet, landing hard enough to jar my teeth. There was a car waiting in the alley. Black sedan with tinted windows. The passenger door flew open. "Get in!" A woman's voice, urgent but not unkind. I ran and threw myself into the passenger seat. The car was moving before I'd fully closed the door. Through the rear window, I saw 2 men emerge from the building behind us, saw them raise their hands, saw the muzzle flash. "Get down!" The driver, a woman maybe 40 with sharp features and alert eyes, pushed my head below the window line with one hand while steering with the other. Bullets struck the car's trunk with sounds like hail on metal, but the car didn't slow. We cornered hard enough to throw me against the door, then accelerated. Within seconds, we were blocks away, merging into the sparse early morning traffic like we'd never been there at all. "Are you hit?" The woman's voice was professional, checking me with the efficiency of someone trained in combat assessment. "No, I'm fine. Who are you?" "Sophia. I work for Mr. Rossi." She glanced at me, her expression somewhere between sympathy and evaluation. "You made quite an impression Wednesday night. He doesn't usually go to this much trouble for civilians. Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome to our world, Naomi. I hope you're a fast learner." The safe house was a penthouse in the Loop, the kind of place that had doormen and security cameras and probably cost more per month than I made in a year. Sophia led me inside, did a quick security check, then left me alone with instructions that Dante would arrive within the hour. I paced, made coffee I couldn't drink, tried to process what had just happened. Men had broken into my apartment, had fired guns at a car I was in. My normal life had exploded in the space of 3 days, and all because I'd noticed something wrong with a glass of wine. When Dante arrived, he came with purpose and barely controlled fury. He stormed through the door still in what looked like the same clothes from whatever he'd been doing when he'd called me, dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. There was blood on his knuckles. Not his own, I guessed. "Are you hurt?" His hands were on me before I could answer, tilting my face toward the light, checking for injuries with a gentleness that seemed at odds with the violence evident in his appearance. "I'm fine. Sophia got me out in time. Sophia is excellent at her job." He released me, stepping back, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "I'm sorry. This is my fault. I should have moved faster to protect you. How is this your fault? I didn't understand any of this. You didn't try to poison yourself. You didn't send those men to my apartment, but they came because of me, because you saved me. In my world, that makes you my responsibility. Your world." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the heated apartment. "What exactly is your world, Dante Rossi?" He studied me for a long moment, those storm-gray eyes weighing something I couldn't identify. Then he sighed and moved to the windows overlooking the city lights. "My family has been in Chicago for 4 generations, he said quietly. "We came from Sicily in the 1920s. My great-grandfather built an empire through hard work and harder choices. Businesses, investments, influence. We've always operated in the spaces between legal and necessary. You're in the Mafia. That's a crude word, but yes. I'm the head of the Rossi family organization, the youngest man to hold that position in 70 years. I took over when my father died 3 years ago, and not everyone was happy about it. My Uncle, Lorenzo, particularly. He felt the position should have been his. The poison, I said, understanding dawning. Your uncle tried to kill you. With the help of the Santoro family, our oldest rivals. They've wanted to destroy the Rossis for decades. Lorenzo offered them an opening if they'd help him take my place. The attempt at Giordano's was their first move. It won't be their last. And now they think I'm involved somehow. That I'm, what, an ally of yours? Now they know you're under my protection, which makes you a target. He turned from the window, his expression fierce. I will not let them hurt you, Naomi. You saved my life. That debt is absolute. But more than that, his voice softened. You interest me, and I don't say that lightly. I should have been terrified, should have demanded he take me to the police, should have insisted on going into witness protection, should have done any number of rational, safe things. Instead, I heard myself ask, what happens now? Now you, stay here where you're safe. Now I deal with the people who threatened you. And now, he stepped closer, until I could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made my pulse race. We figure out what this is between us. There's nothing between us. We barely know each other, don't we? His hand came up, cupping my cheek with a tenderness that stole my breath. I've thought about you every hour since Wednesday night. About your courage, your intelligence, the way you moved to save a stranger without hesitation. I've been with many women, Naomi. Beautiful women, powerful women, but none of them have made me feel like you do. And how do I make you feel? Like I'd burn this city to the ground to keep you safe. The kiss happened so fast I didn't have time to think about it. One moment we were standing inches apart. The next his mouth was on mine, hot and demanding, and nothing like the careful, gentle kisses I was used to. This was hunger and possession and a promise of things that should have scared me but only made me want more. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against mine. Stay with me, he said softly. Not just in this apartment. With me. Let me protect you. Let me show you my world. And if you want to leave after all this is over, I'll let you go. But give me a chance, Bella. Give us a chance. Every rational cell in my brain screamed that this was insane. That I should run. That men like Dante Rossi brought nothing but danger and complications. But standing in his arms, feeling safer than I had since Wednesday night despite knowing I was in more danger than ever, I found myself nodding. Okay, but I have conditions. Name them. I won't be some kept woman. I'm a scientist. I need to work, to use my mind. Agreed. I can set up a private lab for you here. You can continue your research, and I won't be involved in illegal activities. I won't look the other way, but I won't participate. He hesitated, then nodded. Fair enough. Though you should know that my business isn't all illegal. Most of it is completely legitimate. And if I decide this isn't for me, you really will let me go? His jaw tightened, but he nodded. I won't keep you prisoner, Naomi. I want you to choose to be here. Then yes, I'll stay. For now. The smile that crossed his face was brilliant and genuine and made him look almost boyish. Then we have much to discuss. But first, he glanced at his watch. First, I need to handle the men who tried to kill you tonight. Where are they? Being held at one of our properties. Waiting for my judgment. He saw my expression and added, I won't ask you to be there for that. Some parts of my world you don't need to see. But I will see them eventually, won't I? If I stay with you, I'll see all of it. Eventually, yes. He cupped my face again, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. But not tonight. Tonight, you rest. You're safe here. Sophia will stay with you. And I'll return before dawn. He was at the door when I called out. Dante? He turned, one hand on the doorframe. That debt you mentioned, the one you owe me for saving your life. I consider us even now. You saved me tonight. The look he gave me was complex, layered with things I couldn't yet read. We're far from even, Bella, but I appreciate the sentiment. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in a stranger's penthouse, my entire life condensed into a single emergency bag, knowing that I'd just agreed to something that would either be the best or worst decision of my life. Probably both. The next 2 weeks existed in a strange bubble of domesticity wrapped in danger. Dante kept his word about the lab, converting one of the penthouse's spare rooms into a state-of-the-art research facility that honestly put my work lab to shame. He'd brought in equipment I'd only dreamed of using. Mass spectrometers, high-performance liquid chromatography systems, even a custom-built fume hood that probably cost more than my annual salary. When I'd protested the expense, he'd simply shrugged and said that keeping my mind engaged was worth any price. I continued my research remotely, telling my employer I was dealing with a family emergency, which wasn't entirely a lie. My family, when I'd called them, had been horrified by the vague story I'd told about a break-in, and I'd promised to visit soon. A promise I had no idea how to keep. How do you explain to your mother, a retired teacher who believed in following rules and respecting authority, that you're living with a mafia boss? That you're falling in love with a man who orders executions over morning coffee? My mother called every other day, her voice tight with worry. Naomi, baby, are you sure you're okay? You sound different. Strained. I'm fine, Mama, just stressed with work. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. My mother had raised me to be honest, to stand up for what was right. What would she think if she knew where I was? Who I was with? Dante was around more than I expected. Despite running a criminal empire, or whatever the politically correct term was, he made time for breakfast every morning. We'd sit at the penthouse's island counter, drinking coffee and talking about everything from Italian literature to molecular biology. He was educated, well-read, with a mind that could have done anything, but had been shaped by family obligation and tradition into something both brilliant and dangerous. Our morning conversations became my favorite part of the day. He'd quiz me about my research, genuinely interested in the molecular mechanisms of drug interactions. I'd ask him about Roman history, and he'd recite poetry from Dante Alighieri, his namesake, in flawless Italian. The juxtaposition was dizzying sometimes, this man who could discuss Virgil's Aeneid one moment and then take a call about territorial disputes that would likely end in violence the next. One morning, about a week into my stay, I found him cooking. Actually cooking, not ordering something from one of his restaurants. He stood at the stove in dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, flipping something that smelled incredible. My nonna's recipe, he explained when he saw me watching. Frittata with peppers and Italian sausage. She used to make it every Sunday morning when I was a boy. I watched him work, noting the practiced ease of his movements, the way he handled the pan with confidence. This wasn't a man who'd learned to cook for show. This was someone who found genuine pleasure in the act of creation, even something as simple as breakfast. He plated the food with care, cutting fresh bread from a bakery he'd had delivered, pouring fresh squeezed orange juice into crystal glasses. When we sat down to eat, I found myself studying him across the table, this complex man who existed in so many contradictions. Tell me about your family, I said. Your grandmother. What was she like? His expression softened in a way I'd rarely seen. Nonna Maria was the strongest person I've ever known. She came to America with nothing but a suitcase and her faith. My grandfather, he built the business. But Nonna, she built the family. She taught me that power without honor is just brutality, that protecting your people isn't optional, it's sacred duty. Did she know? About the business? She knew everything. He smiled at some private memory. And she had opinions about everything too. When my father wanted to expand into certain territories, wanted to partner with families whose methods she disapproved of, she told him no, just flat out refused to allow it. And my father, this man who terrified grown men, he listened to his mother. What would she think of me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Dante reached across the table, taking my hand. She would have loved you, would have appreciated your courage, your intelligence, would have tried to teach you to make her sauce and complained the entire time that you were too thin and needed feeding. He paused, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. She always told me I'd know the right woman when I met her, because she'd be the one who made me want to be better than I was. I never understood what she meant until that night at Giordano's. The vulnerability in his voice, the rare glimpse of the man beneath the crime lord facade, made my heart ache. I squeezed his hand, not trusting my voice to respond. Over those 2 weeks, I learned more about Dante's world. Not through violence or dramatic confrontations, but through quiet observations and careful conversations. I learned that his organization ran legitimate businesses, restaurants, and construction companies and real estate developments. That most of his income came from these legal ventures, with the illegal aspects serving more as control mechanisms, ways to maintain power and influence in a city where those things determined survival. I met more of his people. Marco, his head of security, who initially regarded me with suspicion but slowly warmed when he saw I wasn't trying to change Dante or push him away from his responsibilities. Sophia, who became something like a friend, teaching me about the unwritten rules of this world, the hierarchy and protocols that kept everything running smoothly. And Vincenzo, Dante's oldest friend and his consigliere, who tested me with pointed questions about my intentions until Dante told him to back off. She stays because she chooses to, Dante had said, his voice firm. Not because she's trapped, not because she has nowhere else to go. She stays because she wants to be here. With me. And it was true. Despite the danger, despite the moral complexity, despite knowing that the man I was falling for had blood on his hands, I didn't want to leave. Every day, I found new reasons to stay. The way Dante listened when I talked about my research, like it was the most important thing in the world. The way he touched me, gentle but possessive, like I was something precious he couldn't quite believe was his. The way he smiled, rare and genuine, when I said something that surprised him. But I also saw the darkness, heard the phone calls late at night, Dante's voice going cold and hard as he gave orders I didn't want to think about too carefully. Noticed the way his men sometimes came back with injuries they wouldn't explain. How certain names stopped being mentioned after whispered conversations. The violence was always there, lurking beneath the surface of our domestic bubble. A reminder that this wasn't a normal relationship, and never would be. One night, unable to sleep, I found Dante standing at the windows overlooking the city. He was shirtless, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the lights with an expression of profound weariness. "Can't sleep?" I asked softly, coming to stand beside him. "Thinking about choices," he said. "The ones I've made, the ones I'll have to make. Whether any of it matters in the end." "What do you mean?" He gestured at the city spread below us. "I control a significant portion of this city's underground economy. I have power, influence, more money than I could spend in 5 lifetimes. But what does it mean, Naomi? What legacy am I building? My father built this empire, and I've expanded it. But for what? To pass it on to children I don't have? To die knowing I was feared but not remembered? You could change it," I suggested carefully. "Use the power you have for something good." He looked at me then, really looked at me. "The way you see the world, Bella. It's so clear, so uncomplicated. I've been in this life since I was 18 years old. I don't know how to be anything else. Then learn. You're one of the most intelligent men I've ever met. If you wanted to shift focus, to use your resources differently, you could. And if the other families don't agree, if they see change as weakness, then you show them its strength. You show them that evolution isn't surrender. It's survival." He set down his glass and pulled me into his arms, resting his chin on the top of my head. "You make me believe things are possible that I'd given up on years ago. That's dangerous, you know. Hope is dangerous in my world. Maybe your world needs more danger then, of the hopeful variety." He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest into mine. "I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway." That night, in his bed, he made love to me with an intensity that felt almost desperate, like he was trying to memorize every inch of my skin, every sound I made. After holding me close, he whispered words in Italian I didn't understand but felt in my bones. "What does that mean?" I asked sleepily. "It means you're mine. It means I love you. It means I'd tear the world apart to keep you safe." The words should have scared me. The possessiveness, the intensity, the casual acceptance of violence. But they didn't, because I understood, finally, what it meant to be loved by a man like Dante Rossi. It meant being protected with every resource he had. It meant being valued above territory and power and legacy. It meant being the one person in his world who saw all of him, the brilliant and the brutal, and chose him anyway. "I like this," he said one morning, watching me explain my current research into enzyme mutations. "The way your mind works. You see patterns everywhere. You break down complex systems into their component parts, find the connections others miss. It's what scientists do. We look for the underlying structure, the reason things work the way they do. Everything follows rules, even when it seems random. You just have to find the pattern. I do the same thing, just in different systems. Criminal organizations, political structures, economic networks. He smiled, stirring sugar into his espresso with precise movements. We're not so different, you and I. We both study human behavior, predict outcomes based on established patterns, manipulate variables to achieve desired results. The only difference is your manipulations save lives and mine, well, they don't always. Except I heal people and you. I paused, not sure how to finish that sentence diplomatically. Kill them? His tone was light, but there was steel underneath. Sometimes yes, when necessary. When someone breaks the rules so fundamentally that there's no other option. When protecting my people requires eliminating threats. Does that frighten you? It should, I admitted, meeting his eyes across the counter. Logically, scientifically, I should be terrified of you. You're a man who orders deaths, who operates outside the law, who could end someone's life with a phone call. But honestly, I'm more fascinated than frightened. The psychology of it, the way you compartmentalize morality, the ethical frameworks you've constructed to justify choices most people can't imagine making. There's no compartmentalization. I know exactly what I am, what I do. I've made peace with it because the alternative is chaos. Without people like me, without the structure and rules we enforce, this city would tear itself apart. Nature abhors a vacuum, Naomi. If I didn't control these territories, someone worse would. Someone without my sense of honor, my respect for boundaries. So you're a necessary evil? I prefer to think of myself as a practical one. He reached across and took my hand, his thumb tracing the lines of my palm with gentle attention. My father used to say that the world isn't divided into good and evil. It's divided into order and chaos. Everything we do, everything this family has built over 4 generations, it's about maintaining order in places the law can't or won't reach. But at what cost? How many lives? How much blood? His expression grew somber. More than I can count. More than I want to remember. But I sleep at night knowing that for every life I've taken or ordered taken, I've protected 10 others. For every brutal decision, I've prevented something worse. It's not righteousness, Bella. It's pragmatism. And it's the burden my family has carried since my great-grandfather stepped off that boat from Sicily with nothing but determination and a willingness to do what others wouldn't. It was during these conversations that I fell in love with him. Not with the power or the danger or the expensive penthouse, though I'd be lying if I said those things didn't have some appeal, but with his mind, his dry humor, the way he listened when I talked like my words were the most important thing in his world, and with the gentleness he showed me, the careful way he touched me like I was something precious and breakable despite the violence I knew his hands were capable of. We didn't sleep together immediately. The kiss that first night remained singular for almost a week, though the tension built between us like a physical force. He'd brush past me in the hallway, and I'd feel it all the way to my bones. Our hands would touch, reaching for the same coffee cup, and the air would crackle with electricity. His eyes would follow me across a room with an intensity that made my skin heat. The anticipation was exquisite torture. Every accidental touch, every lingering glance, every moment of proximity felt charged with possibility. I found myself hyper-aware of him constantly. The way he moved, all controlled grace and coiled power. The scent of his cologne, something dark and expensive with notes of leather and cedar. The sound of his voice, especially when he spoke Italian on the phone, the words flowing with a melodic quality that made my stomach flutter even when I didn't understand what he was saying. One afternoon, I was in my lab, focused on analyzing test results, when I felt him behind me. I hadn't heard him come in, which should have startled me but somehow didn't. His presence had become as familiar as my own. "What are you working on?" His voice was close, intimate, his breath warm against my ear, protein folding patterns. I tried to keep my voice steady, professional. "See how this structure here," I pointed to my computer screen, "creates a binding site that allows for specific molecular interactions. If we can synthesize a compound that mimics this shape, we might be able to create more targeted medications with fewer side effects." His hand came to rest on the counter beside mine, not touching but close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin. "Fascinating. You're trying to outsmart evolution, create better versions of what nature already designed. In a way, Yes. We're standing on nature's shoulders, using millions of years of evolutionary trial and error as our foundation, not unlike what I do, taking systems that evolved organically over generations and refining them, making them more efficient. The metaphor hadn't escaped me. We both worked in systems that resisted external control, trying to impose order on inherently chaotic processes. He turned me in my chair to face him, his hands gentle but firm on my shoulders. I've been patient, Naomi, giving you time, space, letting you adjust to this world. But I need you to understand something. This thing between us, it's not going away. Every day I spend with you, every conversation, every moment, it just gets stronger. Tell me you feel it too. I do, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I feel it all the time. When you're in the room, when you're not, when I wake up in the morning knowing you're just down the hall, it terrifies me. Why? Because I'm falling in love with you. And I don't know if that's the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever done. His eyes darkened, something predatory and possessive flashing across his features. Say it again. I'm falling in love with you, Dante Rossi. Even though I shouldn't. Even though everything about this is complicated and dangerous and probably a terrible idea, I can't help it. The kiss was inevitable, had been from the moment he walked into the lab. His mouth found mine with urgent precision, and suddenly all that built-up tension exploded into something fierce and consuming. His hands tangled in my hair, careful not to hurt me but holding me exactly where he wanted me. I gripped his shoulders, feeling the solid strength of him, the barely leashed power in his body. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. I've wanted to do that for days. Every time you bite your lip when you're thinking. Every time you get excited about some scientific discovery and your whole face lights up. Every time you walk past me wearing one of those damn dresses that drive me crazy. I didn't know I drove you crazy. Bella, you've been driving me crazy since the moment you grabbed my wrist at Giordano's. You just didn't realize it because I'm very good at maintaining control. But my control around you? It's hanging by a thread. Then maybe you should stop controlling it. It finally broke on a Saturday night. Dante had been gone all day, handling some business crisis he wouldn't explain in detail, though I'd gathered from overheard phone conversations that one of his warehouses had been hit, inventory stolen, and 2 of his men had been injured in the process. When he returned just after midnight, there was tension radiating off him in waves, his jaw tight, his movements jerky with barely suppressed rage. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey, the expensive kind he kept in a crystal decanter on the bar cart, downed it in one swallow, then poured another with hands that weren't quite steady. I watched from the couch where I'd been pretending to read, actually just waiting for him to come home, worried despite knowing he was more than capable of taking care of himself. Bad day? I asked carefully, setting aside my book. My uncle made a move, hit one of our warehouses on the south side, took $200,000 in product, beat 3 of my people, sent a message that he's done playing nice. He turned to face me, and I saw the rage and grief warring in his expression, the vulnerability he rarely let show. We lost 2 men. Not killed, thank God, but badly hurt. One of them, Marcus, he has a daughter graduating high school next month. He was supposed to walk her down the aisle when she gets married someday. Now he might never walk again. I'm sorry, I said, inadequate words for the pain I saw in him. Sorry doesn't bring them back. Nothing brings them back to how they were before. He set down the glass with controlled force, but I could see his hand trembling. This is my world, Naomi. Men die. Men get hurt. Often violently. Often because of decisions I make, territories I defend, wars I wage. And the worst part is, I can't even promise it won't happen again. Because it will. Tomorrow, next week, next year, someone else's family will get a call that changes everything. Can you really live with that? Can you really stay with a man whose choices lead to other livin' people's suffering? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. This was the test, I realized. Not a test of my courage, or my adaptability, or even my love. A test of whether I could accept the full reality of who he was, what his life demanded, without trying to change him or save him or convince him to be someone safer, someone easier. I stood and crossed to him, taking the whiskey glass from his hand and setting it aside. Then I took his face in my hands, forcing him to look at me. to see the truth in my eyes. I don't know if I can live with it easily, I said honestly. I don't know if I'll ever fully make peace with the violence, with knowing that the man I love makes choices that hurt people. But I know I can't walk away from you either. I've tried. These past 2 weeks, I've tried to convince myself this is temporary, that I'm just here until the danger passes, that I can go back to my normal life once things calm down. But I don't want to leave. Even knowing what you are, what you do, what this life will demand of both of us. I don't want to be anywhere else. Why? His voice was raw, stripped of the usual confidence and control. Why stay with a man like me? You could have anyone, Naomi. Someone safe, someone good, someone whose hands aren't stained with blood. Because you make me feel alive in a way I never have before. Because talking to you is better than anything else I do in a day. Because when you look at me, I feel like I'm the only person who matters in your entire world. Because despite the violence and the danger and the moral complexity, I know you're a man who keeps his promises, who protects his people, who feels the weight of every decision he makes. You're not a monster, Dante. You're a man doing monstrous things for reasons you believe are right. And maybe that makes me complicit. Maybe that makes me morally compromised too. But I choose you anyway. He pulled me into his arms with sudden, fierce intensity, his face buried. In my neck, his body shaking with emotion he rarely let himself express. You're too good for this world, too pure for the darkness I live in. Then be my light in it. Be the reason I remember there's more to life than survival and strategy and maintaining control. You are. His mouth found mine. And this kiss was different from the first. Less controlled, more desperate, like he was trying to prove something to both of us. You are the only pure thing in my life, Naomi. The only choice I've made that wasn't about strategy or family obligation or survival. You're the only thing that's just mine. Just for me. Not because it serves some larger purpose, but because I want you more than I've ever wanted anything. We made love that night in his enormous bed overlooking the city lights, and it was nothing like my previous safe, predictable experiences with the few men I'd dated before. Dante approached everything with the same focused intensity he brought to his work. Learning my body like it was a code to crack. Discovering what made me gasp, what made me arch into his touch, what made me call out his name. He was demanding but attentive, possessive but generous, taking his time to build pleasure until I thought I might shatter from it. When I did shatter, when he finally pushed me over that edge, he watched my face like he was memorizing every expression, every sound. And when he followed me over, his forehead pressed to mine, my name on his lips like a prayer, I felt the click of something falling into place, some fundamental shift in the universe that meant there was before this moment and after this moment, and nothing would ever be the same. After lying in his arms with his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my spine, the city glittering below us like scattered diamonds, I felt more at home than I ever had in my own apartment. This penthouse, with its expensive furniture and its view of a city I barely knew, had become more real than the life I'd built over 28 years. I'm falling in love with you, I whispered into the darkness, the words both confession and commitment. His arms tightened around me, pulling me impossibly closer. I fell the moment you grabbed my wrist at Giordano's. I just didn't realize it until later, when I was lying in bed that first night thinking about your courage, your intelligence, the way you looked at me like I was a man worth saving instead of a monster worth fearing. I've had women in my life, Naomi. Beautiful women, sophisticated women, women who understood my world and wanted a place in it, but none of them made me want to be better. None of them made me question my choices or imagine a different future. You do that. Just by being yourself, by seeing me as more than just the sum of my actions, you make me want to be the man you think I am. You already are that man, I said softly. You just don't always see it yourself. Maybe, or maybe, you're teaching me how to be him. We lay like that for hours, talking quietly about everything and nothing, sharing pieces of ourselves we'd kept hidden. He told me about his father's death, how he'd been shot during what should have been a peaceful negotiation, how Dante had held him while he bled out, receiving his father's final commands and blessings with blood on his hands, how he'd been 29 years old and suddenly responsible for hundreds of people, for territories and businesses and a legacy he hadn't felt ready to carry. I told him about my sister, the one I'd lost to cancer when we were both teenagers, how her death had driven me into science, into the desperate hope that I could save others, even though I couldn't save her. How every drug I developed, every treatment protocol I improved, was a way of honoring her memory, of making her loss mean something. We found common ground in our grief, in the weight of responsibility we both carried, in the need to protect and provide for those who depended on us. And as dawn began to lighten the sky outside, turning the city from black to gray to gold, I realized that I'd found something I hadn't even known I was looking for. A partner, an equal, someone who understood that strength and vulnerability weren't opposites but two sides of the same coin. The test came 3 weeks after that first night. I woke to find Dante already dressed, unusually formal in a dark suit with his hair slicked back. There was a hardness to his expression that I'd learned to recognize as his business face. "I need you to come with me today," he said without preamble. "Where?" "To meet my uncle. We're having a negotiation. I need you there." "I don't understand. What could I possibly contribute to Mafia negotiations? Your presence is the contribution." He sat on the edge of the bed, taking my hand. "Lorenzo has been making noise about the woman I'm protecting, suggesting you're a weakness, suggesting I've gone soft. I need to show him that you're not a weakness. You're a strength. By making me what? Some kind of trophy?" His eyes flashed. "By showing him that you're under my protection, and that anyone who threatens you threatens me directly." He softened slightly. "I won't put you in danger, Bella. You'll be surrounded by my best people. But I need Lorenzo to see that you're real, that you matter to me. It's a strategic move. Everything is strategy with you, isn't it?" "Not everything. Not you. You're the only chaotic, unplanned thing in my life. But yes, I can't help but use every asset I have, and right now, you're my most powerful one." I should have been insulted. Instead, I understood. In his world, showing weakness got you killed. Showing strength, even through unusual means, kept you alive. If my presence could help end this conflict with his uncle, could save lives, then I'd go. 2 hours later, I stood beside Dante in a private room at the back of a restaurant I didn't recognize. Lorenzo Rossi looked like a harder, crueler version of his nephew. Same sharp features, but where Dante's eyes held intelligence and calculation, Lorenzo's held only contempt. "So this is the girl," Lorenzo said in Italian, which I understood thanks to 2 years of language study in college. "Not much to look at." "She saved my life," Dante replied, also in Italian, which is more than your assassins managed to take it. I switched to Italian, keeping my voice calm. "Mr. Rossi, thank you for agreeing to meet. I understand there's been conflict between you and your nephew. Perhaps we can find a peaceful resolution." Lorenzo's eyebrows rose. "She speaks, and with proper grammar, no less. Impressive. But peace isn't possible, my dear. Your boyfriend killed 3 of my men. After they tried to poison him and then kill me in my own home," I pointed out. "In most societies, that's called self-defense. In most societies, people don't shoot first and ask questions later." Dante's hand found the small of my back, a subtle warning. "We're not here to rehash grievances, Uncle. We're here to discuss terms. You want a seat at the table, a say in family business. Fine. But the attempts on my life end. The threats against Naomi end. And you acknowledge me as head of this family. And if I refuse," the temperature in the room dropped, "then we end this another way. And you know how that ends, Uncle." Lorenzo's face went red. "You'd kill your own blood? Over some woman you've known for a month? I'd kill anyone who threatens what's mine. Family doesn't give you unlimited license to commit treason." The standoff stretched, tension thick enough to choke on. Finally, Lorenzo looked at me. "Tell me, girl, what do you see in my nephew? Is it the money? The power?" "I see a man who keeps his word," I said quietly. "Who values loyalty above all else. Who could have let me die to keep his hands clean but chose to protect me instead. You see a woman you can use as leverage. He sees a person worth defending. That's the difference between you." Lorenzo stared at me for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He laughed. "She's got teeth. This one. All right, nephew. You win this round. I'll accept your leadership. For now. But keep your guard up. Not everyone in the family is as understanding as I am." The relief in the room was palpable, but Dante didn't relax. "We'll have formal terms drawn up. You'll sign them in the presence of the other families. And uncle? If I find out you're planning anything, anything at all, against me or mine, I won't be this generous twice. After Lorenzo left, Dante pulled me into his arms, breathing hard. You were magnificent. The way you stood up to him, the way you spoke. You have no idea what you just did. What did I do? You showed him that you're not some naive civilian caught up in things she doesn't understand. You showed him you're intelligent, capable, and under my protection. Most importantly, you showed him that I'm willing to go to war for you. That makes you valuable. That makes you safe. So I'm safe. Because I'm scary now? He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. You're safe. Because you're mine. And everyone knows I protect what's mine. But the safety was an illusion, a temporary peace built on fragile foundations. I should have known that in Dante's world, peace never lasted long. The next 2 days passed in deceptive calm. Dante seemed more relaxed than I'd seen him since we'd met, the tension that usually lived in his shoulders finally easing. We celebrated the successful negotiation with a private dinner at the penthouse, just the two of us, cooked by a chef Dante had flown in from Naples for the occasion. Tell me about your family, I said over pasta that melted on my tongue like a prayer. Your real family, not the organization. What were you like as a kid? He smiled, a soft expression that transformed his features from dangerously handsome to almost boyish. Curious. Always asking questions. My mother used to say I questioned everything, even things I should have just accepted. Why did we live in this house? Why did men come to meet with my father at midnight? Why did Uncle Lorenzo always look angry? Did she answer you? Sometimes, when she could, when the answers wouldn't put me in danger. He paused, his fork suspended over his plate. She tried to shield me from the business as long as possible, wanted me to be normal, to have a childhood that wasn't overshadowed by violence and obligation. But my father, he had different ideas. He started training me young. By the time I was 10, I could break down and reassemble a handgun. By 12, I was sitting in on negotiations, learning to read people, to spot lies. By 15, I'd seen my first kill. His voice was matter of fact, but I heard the pain underneath. How do you process that? Seeing someone die when you're still just a child? You don't, not really. You compartmentalize. Tell yourself it was necessary, deserved, part of maintaining order. You build walls around the memories so they don't bleed into everything else. But sometimes, late at night, I still see some of those faces, still wonder if there was another way. I reached across the table, taking his hand. That's what makes you different from Lorenzo, I said softly. The fact that you question, that you feel the weight of your choices. He sees violence as a tool, nothing more. You see it as a necessary evil that still leaves scars. Is that enough? To feel bad about it? Does guilt absolve anything? Maybe not, but it means you're still human, still capable of change, of choosing differently when you can. We talked long into the night about families and choices, about the weight of legacy and the possibility of redemption. He told me about his mother's death from cancer 5 years earlier, how she'd made him promise to find someone who loved him for who he was, not what he could provide. How she'd told him that real strength wasn't never feeling afraid, it was being afraid and choosing courage anyway. She would have liked you, he said, as we cleared the dishes together, a domestic moment that felt surreal given who we were. Would have appreciated your mind, your backbone, would have told you embarrassing stories about me as a teenager. What kind of embarrassing stories? He grinned. I went through a phase where I wanted to be a legitimate businessman, wore suits every day, tried to convince my father to let me get an MBA instead of learning the family business. Made it about 3 months before reality set in. What changed? Someone attacked one of our restaurants, killed 2 waiters, injured a dozen customers, all to send a message to my father. I saw him at the hospital, saw the families crying over their dead, saw how powerless we were under legitimate law. The men who did it were arrested, sure, but they were back on the street within 6 months with a good lawyer. Our way, he paused. Our way, they never hurt anyone again. And I realized that sometimes the law isn't enough. Sometimes you need people willing to operate outside it to protect those who can't protect themselves. That's a dangerous philosophy. I know. But it's also the truth I've lived with every day since. We're not heroes, Naomi. We're not even good people most of the time, but we're necessary. And sometimes, that has to be enough. On the third day after the Lorenzo meeting, I was in my lab analyzing new compound structures when Sophia burst through the door, her usual calm completely shattered. Her face was pale, her hand shaking as she gripped her phone. "We have a situation. Dante's been taken." The world tilted sideways, my vision tunneling as adrenaline flooded my system. "What? How? When?" "The Santoro family. Riccardo Santoro. Their head. He's been planning this for weeks, apparently. He grabbed Dante an hour ago during a meeting on the west side that was supposed to be neutral ground. We have intel they're holding him at a warehouse in Pilsen, the old manufacturing district." But Sophia's expression grew grimmer. "They've set up a trap. Cameras, motion sensors, booby traps. If we go in with force, if we trigger any of their security, they'll execute him immediately. Then what do we do?" My mind was racing, trying to think through the panic. There has to be a way in. Some vulnerability in their setup. There is. Sophia's face was grim as death. "They sent demands. They want you, Naomi. They're offering a trade. You walk in, unarmed and alone, and they release Dante." "Absolutely not," Marco said, appearing behind Sophia with 3 other men I recognized as Dante's inner circle. "Dante would never forgive us if we let you walk into a trap. He'd rather die than see you hurt. But he won't die. Not if I can prevent it." I was already moving, my mind shifting into the same focused calm I used in emergency medical situations. What exactly did they say in their demands? What were the specific terms? Sophia pulled up a message on her phone, reading it aloud. "Send the scientist. Alone, unarmed, to the address we provide. She has 1 hour. If she doesn't show, if we see any backup, if we detect any surveillance, Rossi dies. Once she's here, we'll release him. You have our word." "Their word means nothing," Vincenzo said, the older man's face hard with decades of experience in this world. "Riccardo Santoro is a snake. He'll kill them both and laugh while he does it." "Maybe," I said slowly, an idea forming. "But I'm betting he wants something more than just revenge. He wants leverage, information, something he can use against the Rossi organization. And he thinks I'm weak, that I'll break easily under pressure. That's his mistake." "What are you thinking?" Sophia asked, her eyes sharp with intelligence. "I'm thinking we give him what he wants. Or at least, we make him think he's getting it." I went to the whiteboard in my lab where I'd been working through chemical formulations, started sketching out a plan. "Riccardo wants me to walk in alone and defenseless. Fine. But defenseless doesn't mean helpless. I'm a pharmaceutical researcher. I work with compounds that can incapacitate, disorient, even temporarily paralyze. If I can get close enough to him, if I can create an opening, you can get Dante out. You want to poison him?" Marco looked skeptical. "How? They'll search you, strip you down if necessary. You can't exactly walk in carrying vials of toxins." "No, but I can carry it in my system. Absorbed through skin contact," I explained, warming to the idea as the chemistry clicked together in my mind. "There are compounds that transfer dermally that become active only when combined with certain catalysts. If I dose myself with one component before going in, then trigger the reaction on contact, I can deliver an incapacitating agent through a handshake, a touch, anything that puts my skin against his." "That's insane," Vincenzo said flatly. "You're talking about using yourself as a chemical weapon. I'm talking about using their expectations against them. They think I'm a helpless civilian. Let them keep thinking that until it's too late. And what if it doesn't work? What if you miscalculate the dosage, or the delivery fails, or Riccardo sees through it?" Sophia's voice was worried but considering, clearly running through tactical possibilities. "Then you come in with force and deal with the consequences. But at least you'll have me inside as intel, as eyes on the situation. And I'll have bought you time to plan a proper assault." I met each of their gazes in turn. I know this is risky. I know Dante will be furious when he finds out. But I also know I can't stand here safe while he's held captive because of me. If there's even a chance this works, we have to try. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Sophia nodded slowly. "All right, but we do this smart. Marco, get the tactical team ready for backup insertion. Vincenzo, coordinate with our police contacts, make sure they can delay response if things go loud. And Naomi, she turned to me, her expression fierce with respect. Tell me exactly what you need to synthesize this compound. Because if we're doing this, we're doing it right. The next 30 minutes were a blur of chemistry and preparation. I synthesized a compound I'd been theoretically researching but never tested. A two-part system where the first component was inert until activated by the second. I absorbed the first part through a topical application on my palms and forearms, areas most likely to make contact. The second part I embedded under a false fingernail Sophia provided, a tiny reservoir that would release on specific pressure. The science was sound, or at least as sound as I could make it in 30 minutes with materials I had on hand. The delivery mechanism was crude, but functional. The real question was whether Ricardo would let me get close enough to deploy it. You understand this could kill you too if the ratios are wrong, Marco said as I finished my preparations. I understand. But the alternative is letting Dante die. That's not acceptable. He's a lucky man, having someone willing to risk this much for him. He'd do the same for me. Has done the same for me. That's what love is in our world, Sophia said softly, checking the GPS tracker she'd hidden in the lining of my jacket. Not flowers and poetry. It's standing between danger and the person you love, knowing you might not survive but doing it anyway. I looked at myself in the mirror, this woman who a month ago had been a careful, cautious scientist with a predictable life. Now I was about to walk into a hostage situation armed with nothing but experimental chemistry and desperate courage. The transformation was complete. I wasn't Naomi Hayes, the researcher, anymore. I was Naomi Hayes, partner to a Mafia boss, and I would do whatever it took to bring him home. 3 days later, I'd find myself standing in that warehouse, having made the choice that would define everything that came after. But in that moment, preparing to trade myself for the man I loved, I only knew one truth. Some debts can't be measured in strategy or power. Some debts are measured in the willingness to sacrifice everything for the person standing beside you. I was working in my lab when Sophia burst through the door, her usual calm shattered. We have a situation. Dante's been taken. The world tilted. What? The Santoro family. They grabbed him an hour ago during a meet on the west side. We have intel. They're holding him at a warehouse in Pilsen. But they've set up a trap. If we go in with force, they'll kill him. Then what do we do? Sophia's face was grim. They sent demands. They want you. Me? Why? Because they know you're Dante's weakness. They're offering a trade. You for him. Absolutely not, Marco said, appearing behind Sophia. Dante would never forgive us if we let you walk into a trap. But I had already made my decision. We're not letting him die because of me. Tell me where and when. 3 hours later, I stood in an abandoned warehouse in Pilsen, surrounded by hostile men with guns, facing someone who introduced himself as Ricardo Santoro. He was older than Dante, maybe 50, with cold eyes and a smile that promised pain. Dante was bound to a chair in the center of the space, his face bloody, one eye swollen shut. But when he saw me, he surged against his restraints. No! Naomi, get out of here! This is a trap! Obviously, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. But I wasn't going to let you die. Ricardo laughed. How touching. True love in the criminal underworld. It almost makes me reluctant to kill you both. That's not what we agreed, I said sharply. The trade was me for him. Let him go. Plans change. He pulled a gun from his jacket. You see, the problem with men like Dante Rossi is that they make things personal. Business should be business. But he made it personal when he refused to share territory, refused to acknowledge that the Santoros have rights to parts of this city. So I'm going to make it personal too. I'm going to make him watch you die. Then I'm going to kill him. And then I'm going to take everything his family built. He leveled the gun at my chest. Any last words? Yes, I said, meeting Dante's eyes across the warehouse. I love you. Thank you for showing me your world. Then Ricardo pulled the trigger, and nothing happened. He frowned, pulled the trigger again. Click, click, click. Still nothing. Interesting. Sophia's voice came from the shadows above us. I always wondered if someone would be dumb enough to fall for the old switcheroo. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Dante's people poured in from every entrance, moving with military precision. The Santoro soldiers barely had time to react before they were disarmed and subdued. Ricardo himself was taken down by Marco, who moved with brutal efficiency. But I only had eyes for Dante. Sophia was cutting him free, checking his injuries. The moment he was unbound, he ran to me, gathering me into his arms, with a desperation I'd never seen from him. "Are you insane?" He was shaking, whether from rage or fear I couldn't tell. "You could have been killed." But I wasn't, because you planned for this, because you knew they'd try to trade. I planned for every possibility, but that doesn't mean. He broke off, pressing his face into my hair. "Don't ever do that again. Don't ever trade your life for mine." "Why not? You'd do it for me." "That's different." "Why? Because you're the big, important mafia boss and I'm just the scientist?" "No. Because I can't live without you." His voice broke. "Because in the last month, you've become more important to me than territory, than family legacy, than anything else in this godforsaken world. If I lost you, Naomi, I don't know what I'd do." I pulled back enough to look at his battered face. "Then I guess we'll just have to make sure neither of us dies for a while, won't we?" Despite the blood and the pain and the lingering adrenaline, he smiled. "Is that a yes?" Yes to what? To staying with me. Permanently. Building a life together. His hands cupped my face. "I know it's fast. I know we're from different worlds. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I want you beside me, Naomi. Not just as my protected civilian, not just as the woman I'm falling for. As my partner. My equal." Around us, his people were efficiently cleaning up the warehouse, dealing with the captured Santoros, doing all the things that came with living in this world. Blood and violence and choices that most people never had to make. And standing in the middle of it all, held in the arms of the most dangerous man in Chicago, I realized I'd already made my choice. Had made it the moment I stopped that wine glass 3 weeks ago. "Yes," I said simply. "Yes to all of it." 1 year later, I stood in that same penthouse, but it was ours now. Not Dante's safe house, not a temporary refuge, but the home we'd built together brick by metaphorical brick. My lab had expanded to take up 2 rooms, state-of-the-art equipment that rivaled anything at major pharmaceutical companies. The living room had comfortable furniture we'd picked out together on a rare afternoon off, arguing good-naturedly about whether leather or fabric would wear better, whether dark or light colors made the space feel bigger. And on the wall hung a single photograph from our wedding 3 months prior, small and private ceremony, just close family and the people who'd helped save both our lives. Looking at that photo, I could still feel the weight of the moment. Dante in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, me in a dress the color of champagne that my mother had cried over, both of us standing in the penthouse's garden terrace at sunset with the Chicago skyline blazing gold behind us. Sophia had been my maid of honor, tears streaming down her usually stoic face. Marco had stood as Dante's best man, managing to look both proud and slightly uncomfortable in formal wear. My mother had been there too, having finally learned the full truth about Dante's world. That conversation had been one of the hardest of my life. Sitting her down and explaining that the man I loved was a criminal boss, that I'd chosen this life knowingly, that I wasn't being coerced or manipulated, but had made an informed decision to stay. She'd been horrified at first, then angry, then finally, grudgingly accepting when she saw how Dante treated me, how he looked at me like I hung the moon. "He protects you," she'd said finally, watching Dante move through the engagement party we'd thrown. "And more than that, he respects you. I see it in how he listens when you talk, how he asks your opinion on important matters, how he never tries to keep you small or manageable. That's rare, baby, even in legitimate relationships. So if you're choosing this with your eyes open, I'll support you." But she'd fixed Dante with a look that could have melted steel. "If you ever hurt my daughter, Mafia boss or not, you'll answer to me." Dante had smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. "I'd be more afraid of disappointing you, Mrs. Hayes, than of any rival family. Your daughter is the best thing that ever happened to me. Hurting her would be destroying the only good part of my life. The war with Lorenzo and the Santoros was over, peace bought with blood and negotiation in equal measure. Lorenzo had been exiled to Italy, content to live out his remaining years on a vineyard in Sicily, spending his days making wine and his nights playing cards with other retired criminals. The The Santoros had been absorbed into the Rossi organization after Ricardo's arrest led to a power vacuum that Dante had filled with strategic precision. And Dante had consolidated his control of Chicago's underworld in a way that even his father hadn't managed, bringing together the 5 families under a council system that balanced power and reduced violence. But the thing I was most proud of wasn't the territory or the peace treaties, or even the expansion of legitimate businesses. It was the clinic. Our clinic. Using my scientific background and Dante's resources and connections, we'd opened a free medical facility on the South Side, in a neighborhood that had been underserved for decades, where people chose between medicine and food because they couldn't afford both. The Rossi Family Medical Center, though we never used that name publicly, occupied a renovated building that had once been a warehouse. Above board, completely legal, offering healthcare to communities that desperately needed it. We provided free primary care, prescription assistance through the pharmaceutical division I oversaw, and even had specialists who donated time for chronic disease management. It was funded by legitimate business holdings, Dante's restaurants and construction companies and real estate developments, all generating profits that went towards saving lives instead of taking them. It was my condition for staying in this world permanently, my way of balancing the moral scales that would never quite be even. That we use the power and money for something good, something that helped people instead of hurt them. Dante had not only agreed, he'd embraced it with the same focused intensity he brought to everything else, seeing the clinic not just as charity but as investment in the communities that had supported his family for generations. He'd shocked everyone, including me, by showing up for the clinic's grand opening and staying for hours, talking to patients, listening to their concerns, even holding a baby while his mother checked in with our intake nurse. The local news had covered it, framing it as a redemption story. The Mafia prince turned philanthropist. Dante had hated the attention, but he'd endured it because he saw the value in changing public perception, in showing that the Rossi organization could be a force for good as well as order. We're not saints, he'd told me that night, watching the news coverage with a mix of pride and discomfort. This doesn't erase the things I've done, the choices I've had to make, but maybe it balances them a little. Maybe my father's legacy and my grandfather's sacrifices can mean something more than just power and territory. Maybe we can leave something behind that actually matters. The clinic had been open for 9 months now, and we'd served over 5,000 patients. 5,000 people who had access to healthcare they wouldn't have had otherwise. 5,000 stories of illnesses caught early, of chronic conditions managed, of lives saved or at least improved. It didn't erase the violence or the moral complexity of Dante's world, but it mattered. It was real. It was good. And it had changed how people saw the Rossi family. We weren't just criminals anymore, though we were still that too. We were community members, investors in the neighborhood's future, proof that power could be used for more than just maintaining control. "You're thinking too hard again," Dante said, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist, pulling me back against his chest. "I can always tell when you're overthinking because you get this little crease between your eyebrows. Right here." He kissed the spot he'd mentioned, his lips warm against my skin. I was just thinking about that night at Giordano's. How one decision changed absolutely everything. How grabbing your wrist led to all of this. The penthouse, the clinic, the life we've built. Everything. Regrets? His voice was light, but I heard the genuine question underneath. We'd been married for 3 months, together for just over a year, but he still sometimes seemed surprised that I'd stayed, that I'd chosen this life willingly. Not even one. I turned in his arms, meeting his storm-gray eyes that I'd learned to read like a beloved book. Well, maybe one tiny regret. I wish I'd known what I was getting into so I could have worn better. Shoes. Running from assassins in heels was absolutely not fun. He laughed, the sound rich and genuine, and nothing like the cold, controlled man I'd first met a year ago. The transformation was remarkable sometimes. He still had that edge of danger, still carried violence in his hands and authority in his voice. But around me, in moments like this, he let himself be just Dante. Not the boss, not the strategist, just the man who loved me with an intensity that sometimes still took my breath away. "I'll make sure all future assassins receive strict instructions to attack only when you're wearing sneakers," he said solemnly. "It's the least I can do as your devoted husband." "How very considerate of you." He turned me fully in his arms, his expression growing serious in the way that meant he was about to say something important. I mean it though. Bella. No regrets? Because I know this life isn't easy. I know there are dangers and complications and moral ambiguities that most people never have to navigate. I know you gave up a normal life, a safe career, the possibility of a simple relationship. I know what you sacrificed to stay with me. I know what I gained too, I said softly, reaching up to cup his face, feeling the familiar stubble rough against my palm. I gained a partner who challenges me intellectually every single day. I gained work that actually matters, research that saves lives. Instead of just padding corporate profits, I gained purpose, Dante. And I gained you. I'm not just existing anymore. I'm living, really living, taking risks and making choices and building something meaningful. How could I regret that? His kiss was gentle, reverent. Nothing like the desperate, consuming kisses of that first night when everything was new and uncertain and terrifyingly intense. This was the kiss of a man who knew he had time, who didn't have to rush because we were building something permanent, something that would last. When we broke apart, both of us slightly, breathless despite the gentleness, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Not the ring box from our engagement, but something different, smaller. I have something for you, he said, opening it to reveal a necklace. Delicate gold chain with a small pendant that glittered in the evening light. I lifted it out carefully, examining the pendant more closely. It was a wine glass, rendered in miniature with exquisite detail. Tiny diamonds catching the light at the rim. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Each line perfect, the proportions exact. So you never forget the night you saved my life, he said softly, taking the necklace from my hands and fastening it around my neck with practiced ease. The night everything changed. The night a brilliant, courageous woman looked at a stranger and decided he was worth saving, even though every rational instinct should have told her to walk away. I'll never forget that night, I promised, touching the pendant gently, feeling the weight of it settle against my collarbone like a talisman. How could I? It was the night I met the man I was always meant to find. The night I stopped being safe and started being alive. We stood there in our home, in the space we'd created together from violence and choice and desperate courage. The city lights of Chicago spread out below us like a promise, millions of lives intersecting in patterns we could barely comprehend. Two people from completely different worlds who'd found something neither of us had been looking for. Love that didn't follow rules or make sense. Partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. A future that was built on choices made in heartbeats, on loyalty tested by fire, on the understanding that sometimes the most dangerous decision is also the most right. That's my story. The complete, unvarnished truth of how I, Naomi Hayes, pharmaceutical researcher and generally cautious person, ended up as the wife of Chicago's most powerful crime boss, all because I noticed something wrong with a glass of wine and chose to save a stranger's life. Would I make the same choice again, knowing everything that followed? The danger, the moral complexity, the life that exists in shades of gray, instead of the black and white certainty I'd always preferred? The fear of losing him, the weight of knowing that the man I love has done and will do terrible things, the constant negotiation between my values and the reality of his world. Every single time, without hesitation, without doubt. Because some debts can't be measured in dollars or territory or power. Some debts are measured in shared mornings and whispered promises and the fierce certainty that you'd burn down the world for the person standing beside you. In the quiet moments when he traces constellations on my skin and tells me stories about his Nana's garden in Sicily. In the way he listens when I talk about my research, like understanding molecular structures is the most important thing he could possibly do with his time. In how he holds me after nightmares, both his and mine, offering comfort without judgment or demands for strength we don't have at 3 a.m. And that, in Dante's world or mine, in the gray areas where we've built our life together, is what they call loyalty. The kind that changes everything. The kind that makes you who you were always meant to be. The kind that's worth every risk, every sacrifice, every impossible choice. If this story of dangerous loyalty and fierce love moved you, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We share new tales of passion, protection, and impossible choices every week. Comment below the moment you realize this wasn't just about saving a life, but about finding the person you'd risk everything for. Because sometimes the most dangerous choice leads to the safest love. And sometimes, the test of loyalty becomes the foundation of forever.